Number one is a quadratic trinomial, so this is when we factor with the parenthesis times parenthesis. So my first have to multiply to x squared, so x times x. I look at the signs. Because the 63 is positive, but then I want the two numbers to add to negative 16, it's minus minus. Two numbers that multiply to 63 that add to negative 16, that is minus 9, minus 7. And we're done. Number 2, this one is a difference of squares because 49 is a square number and I see there's a negative sign. So this has a special way to factor it. It's parenthesis times parenthesis. I know it's x and x. That makes x squared. One's plus, one's minus, and the square root of 49 is 7. So now we're done. X plus 7, x minus 7. Okay, number 3. I check if there's a GCF, but there isn't. So I go right to the factoring. Because my a value is 2, I'm going to start with 2x times x. All my signs are plus, so I know it's plus plus. I want two numbers that multiply to 21. So I can guess 3 and 7. But now we have to check. The inners and the outers have to make 17. So the inners are 3x. The outers make 14x, and that does add up to 17x, so I'm done. Number 4, the first thing I check is a GCF. I know all three numbers are divisible by 5. Whatever number I divide by comes outside of the parentheses. So 5x squared divided by 5 is just x squared minus 15 divided by 5 is 3x, and then the 10 divided by 5 is 2. But now I have a quadratic trinomial inside of the parentheses. The 5 just comes along for the ride. And whenever you have a trinomial, you factor into parenthesis times the parenthesis. I know my first numbers have to be x and x. I look at the signs. The two numbers multiply to 2 but add to negative 3, so it has to be minus minus. The only two numbers that multiply to 2 are 2 and 1. And negative 2 and negative 1 do add up to negative 3. So I'm good. I'm done with that one. All right, number 5, whenever you start with a negative, the first thing you have to do is divide by negative 1. I never want a negative 1 in the variable. So the negative 1 comes out in front of the parentheses. So negative x squared divided by negative 1 is positive x squared. Positive 15 divided by negative 1 is negative 15x. And then negative 50 divided by negative 1 is positive 50. So now I can go ahead and I can factor my quadratic trinomial. So x and x make x squared. Two numbers that multiply to 50 but add to negative 15. Negative 5 and negative 10. So those multiply to positive 50 but add to negative 15, and now I'm done. Okay, number 6 is a tricky one because it's a difference of two squares. So let's write that down. I know 9 is a square number and 64 is a square number. And there is a minus sign. So I'm going to set it up, parenthesis times parenthesis. The square root of 9 is 3. So 3x, plus minus. And the square root of 64 is 8. So 3x plus 8, 3x minus 8. This works because remember your inners make 24x. Your outers make negative 24x, and that cancels. That makes 0. That's why there's no middle number. Okay, let's move on to number 7. This is another difference of squares. So I'm going to factor it into x and x. The signs have to be 1 plus and 1 minus. The square root of 144 is 7. So x plus 7, x minus 7, you're done. Remember, the inners make 7x, The outers make negative 7x. That makes 0. That's why there's no middle number. Okay, number 8. The first thing we want to do is see if there's a GCF. There is. 28 and 16 are both divisible by 4. They both have an m in common, so the GCF is 4m. So the 4m comes outside of the parentheses. So 28m squared divided by 4m, that leaves you with 7m plus, and 16m divided by 4m, that's just plain old 4. I'm done. I can't factor anymore. Number 9, look for a GCF. I know 12 and 15 are both divisible by 3. That's my GCF, so I put it outside of the parenthesis. 12x divided by 3, that gives me 4x, minus 15 divided by 3 is 5. I look at 4x minus 5, that's not a difference of 2 squares, so I can't do anything else, I'm done. Okay, number 10, always look for the GCF first. I can divide every number by 3. That's my GCF. Okay, so the GCF comes outside of the parentheses. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, so I'm just left with x squared. 39 divided by 3, that's 13, so I'm left with 13x. And 120 divided by 3 is 40. Okay, so now I have a quadratic trinomial, so I'm going to factor that into the parenthesis times parenthesis. So x and x, that makes x squared. Two numbers that multiply to 40 but add to negative 13, that's negative 8 and negative 5. And now I'm done. Negative 8 and negative 5 multiply to 40, and negative 8 plus negative 5 make negative 13. Okay, so number 11, the GCF is 2. That's always your first step. If there's a number I can divide 2 and 50 by, I do that first. The 2 comes outside of the parentheses. I'm left with p squared minus 25. Now normally you'd be done, but inside is another difference of squares. So this one has one more step. So carry that 2 down. Now the difference of squares, remember it's p 1 plus and 1 minus. The square root of 25 is 5. So p plus 5, p minus 5, and now we're done. Number 12, remember whenever you have a negative in the front, you want to take that out first. And the GCF is 3x. Okay, because I know negative 18 divided by negative 3 makes 6. And then I have x squared divided by x leaves me with 1x. And then 21x divided by negative 3x makes negative 7. Okay, that one's tricky, so let's check it. Remember, if I redistribute, I'll go back to what I started with. So negative 3x times 6x makes negative 18x squared. And then negative 3x times negative 7 makes positive 21x, so that one is good. Number 13. There is no GCF. I can't divide 18 by 5, so I'm just going to have to get right to guess and check. Because it's a trinomial, we factor it as 5x times x. Because 5x times x gives me 5x squared. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 18, so I can guess 9 and 2. So I know the inners make 9x, the outers make 10x. My goal is to get negative 1. Remember, I want the inners and outers to make negative 1x. So if I play around with the signs, I can make it a positive 9x and a negative 10x. So that's going to work. 5x plus 9 times x minus 2. All right, number 14, I see a GCF. It's 2. I can divide both numbers by 2, so the 2 comes outside of the parenthesis. I'd be left with p squared plus 36. Because there's a plus sign, it's not a difference of 2 squares, so I'm done. It has to be a minus sign. All right, and then finally number 15, the GCF is 4x. I can divide both numbers by 4x, so that comes outside of the parentheses. 24 divided by 4 is 6, x squared divided by x is x, minus, and then 20x divided by 4x is 5. And we're done. I can check by distributing. 4x times 6x is 24x squared, and 4x times negative 5 is negative 20x, so I do end up with what I started with.